Right. Um, Ever tried to learn a new language? Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be a little intimidating, right? Trying to like level up your English skills, but not even sure where to start.
Yeah. It's a lot like looking at this huge mountain of, vocabulary and all these grammar rules.
Yeah.
Kind of overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
But what if instead of trying to climb the whole mountain all at once, we just focus on like conquering a few trails,
I like that analogy. What kind of trails are we talking about here?
Well, think of it this way, right? Like instead of trying to memorize every single word in the dictionary, how about we just, master those essential phrases you'll use every day, in regular conversation. Like build up your confidence one conversation at a time.
Okay, so we're talking about quick, practical English, the kind of stuff you can actually use right away.
Exactly. And luckily for us, there's this podcast called Speak English Official that has this really awesome episode. It's called Pasted Text. It's packed with all these helpful phrases. That's actually what we're going to be breaking down in this deep dive so you can start using them right away.
Perfect. I'm ready to unlock those conversational building blocks. Where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with greetings, right? It might seem basic, but the podcast really emphasizes how important it is to, master both formal and casual greetings. Like, you wouldn't want to accidentally use slang in a job interview or something, would you?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Definitely important.
Right. So they start with a classic formal greeting. It's, hi, how are you? Then a polite response like, I'm good, thank you. How about you? And then finish it off with something friendly like, I'm doing great. Nice to see you. It's really clear, really concise. It's formal, but it doesn't use any big fancy words.
So what about in a casual setting? What do they recommend for those situations?
Well, for those more relaxed, everyday situations, they suggest something like, hey, what's up? Which you could respond to with something like, not much, just chillin', you. And to wrap it up, a simple, same here, let's catch up later, works perfectly.
Yeah, see, that's what I love about learning these specific phrases. It takes all the guesswork out, right?
Yeah.
You just know exactly what to say, no more awkward silences. I feel more confident already just hearing them.
I know, right? And even though these greetings seem pretty simple, there's a deeper lesson here, right? It's about understanding that like the context kind of shapes the language we use. You wouldn't use what's up with your boss, but it's totally fine with, friends.
So we're not just memorizing phrases. We're learning how to use them the right way in different situations, like with our friends or our boss. That's really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And another point they emphasize, which I think a lot of language learners kind of forget about, is how important pronunciation is. They even encourage listeners to, repeat the phrases out loud to really get them down.
Yeah, I've heard that before about repeating out loud. But why is pronunciation so important? Like, as long as people get what I'm saying, that's good enough, right?
Well, yeah, people might understand you even if your pronunciation isn't perfect, but clear pronunciation can really make a difference, especially in noisy places like restaurants or if you're talking on the phone. It can even make you feel more confident when you're speaking.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I've been so focused on grammar, I haven't given pronunciation enough attention.
Yeah, it's a common mistake. A lot of language learners prioritize grammar over pronunciation, but they're both super important. Think of it like this, Grammar is like the structure of a house, but pronunciation is the paint, the stuff that makes it look good,
Okay, I'm definitely going to pay more attention to pronunciation from now on. So we've covered greetings. What about more practical scenarios? Like, let's say I need to go shopping. What then?
Oh, yeah, shopping. So imagine you're in an English-speaking country, you're out shopping, right? You see something you like, but you need help finding the right size or, I don't know, the right color. What do you say?
I'd probably just freeze up and point at things awkwardly.
Don't worry, the podcast has got you covered. They suggest starting with a simple, excuse me, can you help me? It's polite, it's effective, it gets someone's attention.
Okay, that's easy enough. I can remember that. What next?
Well, from there, you can just say, I'm looking for a, and then you fill in the blank, right? Like, I'm looking for a pair of shoes, and then they'll ask you stuff like, what size do you need?
See, these phrases are so straightforward. I feel like I could actually use them without, tripping over my words.
Exactly. And what I really like about their approach is that it focuses on being clear and concise, especially when you're in a new environment and feeling a little overwhelmed. Just keep it simple.
Okay, so I found those perfect shoes. They're in my size.
Yeah.
But what if they only have one color? Like, what if I want to see if they have it in a different color?
Ah, that's a good question. For that, you can just ask, do you have it in another color? Or be more specific, like, do you have this in blue? Simple, direct.
This is making me realize that shopping in English doesn't have to be a scary thing. It's just about having a few key phrases ready to go.
Absolutely. And the more you practice those phrases, the easier it gets. You'll start using them without even thinking about it.
Okay, so greetings and shopping check. What other everyday situations does this podcast cover?
Well, have you ever been traveling, exploring a new city, and suddenly your stomach starts rumbling?
Oh, tell me about it. Happens to me all the time.
Right. And being able to navigate a restaurant in English can make all the difference. It can turn a stressful situation into a really enjoyable experience. So imagine you're ready for a nice meal.
Okay, I'm picturing a cozy little restaurant. The menu is full of delicious-sounding dishes. I'm ready to order. What are some phrases that'll help me sail through this experience?
Well, first things first, to get your table, you can just say, "Good evening. Do you have a table for two?" Simple as that.
Easy. And when the waiter comes to take my order, I just get a little nervous trying to remember what to say.
No worries. The podcast gives you the tools. You can start by politely asking, "Can I see the menu, please?"
Okay, that's a good one to remember. And then once I've made my very important food decisions.
That's when you get to place your order. You can keep it simple, like, "I'll have the pasta, please." Or be more specific, like, "I'd like the grilled salmon with a side of roasted vegetables," whatever you're feeling.
And what about drinks? Are there any phrases for that?
Absolutely. You can just say, "Just water for me, thank you." Or, if you're feeling adventurous, "I'd like a glass of red wine, please."
See, this is exactly why I love learning these phrases. It makes everything so much less stressful. But what about when I'm ready to pay? That always feels a little more weird.
Oh, they've got that covered too. When you're ready for the bill, all you need to do is say, "Can I have the bill, please?"
Perfect. I feel so much more prepared now. But I've got to admit, I still get a little nervous actually speaking English out loud. Like, what if I freeze up or say the wrong thing?
Oh, that's totally normal. Even native speakers mess up sometimes. The important thing is to not let fear hold you back. Remember, the podcast really emphasize practicing these phrases regularly.
Yeah, they did. But sometimes repetition can feel a bit, I don't know, tedious. Are there ways to make it more fun, more engaging?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's actually a perfect segue into our next section where we'll explore some fun and effective ways to practice.
Ooh, okay. I'm ready to hear about that. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be back with more tips and insights in just a moment. We're back. And I'm still thinking about all those practical phrases we talked about. But I'm really curious about those practice tips you mentioned because repeating phrases over and over again doesn't exactly sound like a party.
Right, yeah. It can get a little boring. But what if we think about it a little differently? Like, instead of it being this chore, it's like a workout, for
Yeah.
your language muscles. Like, the more you use them, the stronger they get.
Okay, yeah, I like that. But how do we make this language work out more fun? Because
Yep.
I'm not exactly the type to hit the gym just for kicks.
Well, luckily there are a lot of creative and fun ways to practice. Like, remember those language exchange apps we talked about before? Those are awesome for connecting with native speakers and just practicing your conversation skills in a real world setting.
Right. It's like having a language buddy to help you work out those conversational kinks.
Exactly. And it's not just about speaking either. You can use these apps for writing practice too. Actually, the Speak English Official podcast made a really interesting point about this. They said something like, think about how you learned your native language right. It wasn't all textbooks and grammar rules. It was about interacting with the world around you.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. I mean, as a kid, I learned by listening to my parents, watching TV, reading. It wasn't this like structured academic thing, you know?
Exactly. So why not use that same approach with English? Immerse yourself in the language as much as you can. Watch movies, listen to music, read articles, even just follow English-speaking people on social media. It all helps to build your vocabulary and your overall understanding.
Okay, I'm feeling more inspired already. It's not just about drilling myself with flashcards. It's about surrounding myself with the language and making it enjoyable. But what about pronunciation? I know we talked about how important it is, but are there any specific tips for getting better at it?
Yeah, for sure. And this is where those online pronunciation guides can be really helpful. They can help you fine-tune your accent and just sound more natural. A lot of them break down sounds phonetically, which can be really useful for figuring out, like, how to position your tongue in your mouth and all that.
I've seen those phonetic symbols before, but I never really knew what to do with them.
Yeah, they can seem a little intimidating at first, but once you get the hang of them, they're actually super useful. It's like a secret code to unlock the sounds of English.
I like that, cracking the pronunciation code. So language exchange apps, pronunciation guides, immersive experiences, those are all great tips. But is there anything else, that can help us learn more effectively, something that goes beyond just practicing phrases?
One thing that often gets overlooked in language learning is the power of the mind. Specifically, like how we learn and remember things. Have you ever heard of spaced repetition?
Spaced repetition. Yeah, it sounds kind of familiar, but I can't quite remember.
It's this learning technique that's based on the idea that we remember things better when we review them at different intervals. So basically, instead of like cramming everything all at once, you space out your practice sessions over time.
So instead of trying to memorize like a ton of phrases in one sitting, I should spread them out over a few days or even weeks.
Exactly. And there are even apps that can help you with this. They'll track your progress and remind you when it's time to review certain phrases. The idea is to review the material right before you're about to forget it, which helps you remember it better in the long run.
That's fascinating. It's like hacking your brain to learn more efficiently.
Yeah, it kind of is. And the best part is that it takes the pressure off. You don't have to remember everything perfectly right away. It's okay to forget as long as you come back to it later.
This is making me realize that there's so much more to language learning than I thought. It's not just about memorizing words and phrases. It's about understanding how your brain works and using that to your advantage.
For sure. And speaking of brains, I think it's important to remember that learning a new language isn't just about intellectual effort. It's an emotional journey, too.
Ooh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. When you're learning a new language, you're not just learning, words and grammar. You're stepping outside of your comfort zone, challenging yourself, and putting yourself out there in a way that can feel, I don't know, a little vulnerable.
Yeah, that's so true. I definitely feel a mix of excitement and fear when I try to speak English with, native speakers. It's like a roller coaster of emotions.
Right. And it's important to acknowledge those feelings and, be kind to yourself throughout the process. Some days you'll feel like you're making amazing progress, and other days you'll feel frustrated and discouraged, and that's completely normal.
Yeah, I've definitely had those days where I feel like giving up.
That's why it's so important to celebrate your wins, no matter how small they seem. Like, did you order a coffee in English without stuttering? High five. Did you have a short conversation with a native speaker and understand everything they said? That's awesome. Celebrate that.
You're right. I tend to focus on my mistakes and get down on myself when I don't get things right. I need to change my perspective and celebrate those little wins more.
Yeah, and remember, mistakes aren't failures. They're opportunities to learn and grow. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs happen when you stumble a bit and have to figure things out.
That's a good way to look at it. So we've got our practice tips, our brain hacks, and our positive mindset. Anything else we should cover before we wrap up this section?
Well, there's one more technique that I think can be really helpful for bridging that gap between practicing phrases and actually using them in real conversations. Have you ever tried visualization?
Visualization, like picturing myself speaking English fluently.
Exactly. It might sound a little, I don't know, out there. But there's actually a lot of research that shows that visualization can help people improve their performance in all sorts of areas, including language learning.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does it work?
It's actually pretty simple. When you're learning a new phrase, don't just repeat it over and over in your head. Close your eyes and really imagine yourself in a specific situation where you'd use that phrase.
So, if I'm learning how to order food at a restaurant, I should actually picture myself sitting at a table, looking at the menu, and saying the words out loud in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And don't just focus on the words themselves. Try to engage all of your senses. Imagine what you see, what you hear, what you smell in that restaurant. Feel the texture of the menu in your hands. Taste the food. The more vividly you can imagine this whole experience, the more likely you are to remember the phrases and use them confidently in real life.
Wow, that's a really cool technique. I never thought about using visualization for language learning before.
It can be super powerful. It's like creating a movie in your mind where you're the star and you're speaking English fluently and confidently.
I love that. I'm definitely going to try that. I'm going to try incorporating visualization into my my practice routine. But before I get too carried away, we are running out of time for this section. What's coming up next?
Well, we've talked about the, practical side of learning phrases and some mental strategies to make that process more effective. But there's one more element that I think is super crucial for achieving fluency in any language.
Ooh, okay. I'm on the edge of my seat. What is it?
We'll dive into that in part 3 of our deep dive. Stay tuned to find out.
Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into quick and easy English conversations. We've covered a lot, right? Practical phrases, pronunciation, you know, spaced repetition, even visualization. So what is that crucial element you mentioned, the one that can really take our English fluency to that next level?
Well, it's something that a lot of people kind of overlook, but it's super important, embracing the cultural context of the language.
Ooh, okay. That's interesting. I never really thought about language and culture as being connected, I've always just focused on the mechanics of it all.
Yeah.
The grammar, the vocab, the
I
pronunciation.
get it, but language is way more than just words and rules, right? It's a reflection of, a culture's values, their beliefs, their history. It's how people express themselves, how they connect with each other, how they make sense of the world.
So you're saying that to really truly master English, I need to understand, something about the culture of English-speaking countries.
Exactly. It's about going beyond, just saying hello or thank you and understanding the nuances, right? Why do people say things in certain ways? What kind of humor do they use? What are their references?
Yeah, I get that. I've definitely had moments where I understood the words someone was saying, but I didn't really get the meaning, like I was missing some kind of cultural subtext.
Exactly. And those moments, they can be confusing, even a little frustrating, but they're also opportunities to learn and grow. They make us, dig a little deeper, ask questions, try to understand the language, beyond just the surface level.
So how do we actually embrace this cultural context? Do I need to start reading history books and watching documentaries about English-speaking countries?
Well, that's one way to do it, but it can also be much simpler, like just actively engaging with English language media and looking for opportunities to connect with native
Okay,
speakers.
that sounds a bit more manageable.
Hmm.
So stuff like reading books by English authors, watching movies, listening to music, even following people on social media, right?
Exactly. It's all about immersing yourself in the culture through, its different forms of expression. Pay attention to the dialogue, the humor, the slang, the cultural references. Notice how people interact, their
Okay.
tone of voice, their body language.
So it's like learning by osmosis, absorbing the culture through those everyday interactions.
Exactly. And the more you expose yourself to the culture, the more you'll start to naturally pick up on the nuances of the language. You'll start to understand why certain phrases are polite or rude, why certain jokes are funny, even what topics are considered taboo.
That's fascinating. It's learning a whole new way of seeing the world
Yeah,
through the lens of a different culture. But what about connecting with native speakers? We talked about those language exchange apps, but are there other ways to do that?
totally. If you can travel to an English-speaking country, that's the best way to immerse yourself, right? You
Yeah.
get to experience the culture firsthand and practice your skills in, a real-world environment.
I'd love to do that someday. But for now, are there any options that are a little closer to home?
Of course. A lot of cities have English conversation groups or language exchange meetups. It's a way to, meet native speakers and other learners in a casual setting.
Oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to see if there's something like that in my area.
And don't forget about online communities. There are tons of forums, social media groups, even virtual language cafes where you can connect with people, from all over the world who are learning English.
So many options. This is making me realize that embracing the cultural context isn't just about, passively taking in information. It's about actively looking for ways to connect with the language and the people who speak it.
Exactly. It's that active engagement that really brings language learning to life, It transforms it from a purely intellectual thing into a much richer experience, something that can really broaden your horizons and your understanding of the world.
This has been such a great conversation. I feel like I've learned so much, not just practical tips for improving my English, but also a whole new way of thinking about language learning. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any words of wisdom for our listeners who are just starting out on this journey?
Yeah, just remember, learning a new language is a marathon, not a sprint. Right. You're going to have moments of frustration. You might feel stuck sometimes, even want to give up. But don't let those moments define your experience. Embrace the challenges, celebrate the wins, and never lose sight of your goals. And most importantly, have fun. Learning a language is an amazing opportunity to expand your mind, meet new people, and experience the world in a whole new way.
That's amazing advice. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into quick and easy English conversations. We hope you've enjoyed it and that you feel, ready to take your English to the next level. Just remember, start small, practice consistently, embrace the culture, and never stop exploring.
Happy learning, everyone!